The skies over Alaris Prime had never turned black so quickly. One moment there was blue glow above the royal city towers, and the next, fire rained from orbit. Nobody saw the attack coming, not even the Queen's most loyal seers, the crops that had fed billions turned to ash within hours. The famine began quietly, then it screamed through the streets. Princess Rayla stood near a dead vine, her fingers brushing what used to be fruit. Her people were dying, and their mighty technology had failed them. They built empires across stars, but not one of them knew how to grow food from dirt. Their enemies didn't need to fight. They just poisoned the skies and waited, she had heard. Whispers about a strange planet, small, wet, stubborn. A primitive species called humans had somehow turned deserts into green. The idea felt like myth, but desperation was stronger than pride. Her advisors warned against it. Her generals laughed. But she gave the command to send a single ship. Jaren had seen plenty of storms on his farm, but never a ship like this. It was elegant, humming with violet energy, and shaped like a flower turned inside out. He dropped his hoe and backed away as the landing pads crushed the edge of his crop rows. Out came someone he didn't expect, a woman with eyes like stars and a presence that made the wheat bend. "I am Princess Rayla of the Ilarian Dominion," she said with slow, careful words. "I come not to rule, I come to learn." Jaren blinked. His farm had never been invaded, but this didn't feel like war. It felt like something else. She looked tired, hollow, but her voice carried strength wrapped in humility. "Y'all picked the wrong place if you're looking for luxury," Jaren muttered, scratching his beard. He didn't know what to do with a princess in overalls. She had never seen dirt before. She flinched when the wind picked up dust, but she stayed. She watched everything he did, never missing a motion. He showed her how to water by hand, how to pull weeds one by one, how to test soil by rubbing it in your palms. At first her fingers trembled, her nails broke, but she didn't complain. She just asked questions, hundreds of them, about worms and seeds and light. Her voice broke. Once, quietly, when a sprout finally pushed through the dirt. The next day, she knelt in the field at sunrise. The hem of her once royal robe was muddy. Jaren brought her boots. She refused them. "I must feel the earth if I'm to save mine," she said. That morning, something in him changed. She wasn't just learning to farm. She was learning to hope. His neighbors came, whispering about the alien girl on his land. Some feared her, others mocked her. But one old woman said something strange. "If she touches the earth with her heart, she's one of us." Jaren remembered that as he watched Rayla laugh for the first time while chasing a chicken through the rows. Then came the drone. It hovered silently just above the trees, black and sharp like a predator. Jaren didn't move. Rayla froze. It belonged to her enemies. Somehow they had followed her across light years. The drone snapped a photo and fled. Rayla whispered two words that made Jaren's stomach drop. "They're coming." He led her into the storm cellar and bolted the door. She sat on a pile of grain sacks, holding one tiny sprout in her hand. "They'll burn this too," she said. Jaren shook his head. "Not if we dig deep. Roots always survive if you plant them right." She stared at him like he had said something. Holy, above ground, clouds gathered unnaturally fast. Lightning crackled green. Ships would arrive by morning. Jaren sharpened old tools and loaded his ancient shotgun. He wasn't a soldier, but this was his land. Rayla stood beside him, not in armor, but with a shovel. "Teach me to defend the seed," she said. He nodded. The field would become more than a garden. It would be a battlefield. But not with bullets. With knowledge, with dirt under fingernails, with defiance. Rayla had come as a student. Now she would fight like a farmer. And Jaren, the simple man from Earth, had just become her last hope. Asterisk, the night was heavy with silence. Rayla sat by the small lamp inside the cellar, watching the flickering light reflect off the dirt-covered floor. Jaren had gone up again to check the skies. She listened to the creak of wooden steps above her and the wind pressing against the door like an angry breath. When he came back down, his face was tight. 3 ships, he said, not far. Could be scouts, could be worse. Ryla didn't blink. She stood, walked to the sprouting seedling she had placed in a pot, and gently touched its new leaves. This life cannot be taken again. Not by them. Jaren handed her a folded cloth. Inside was a metal key and a photo. The photo showed a younger Jaren standing beside a smiling older man, likely his father. This farm's been in my family for 5 generations, he said. We don't run, we grow. Rayla closed her eyes for a moment, then placed the photo against her chest. They spent the night not in fear but in work. Rayla helped cover the crops with netting to protect them from wind. Jaren reinforced the greenhouse doors. Every motion they made was slow, careful, quiet. It wasn't about hiding. It was about preserving something sacred. At sunrise, the ships appeared. Not in the sky, but walking on mechanical legs through the far fields. Scout mechs. Silver with thin limbs and red sensors scanning every leaf. Jaren grabbed his old rifle but didn't raise it. They're just looking, not shooting. Not yet. Rayla stepped forward, holding a basket of soil. One of the mechs turned toward her. Its lens focused and zoomed in. She raised the basket, showing the small green sprout inside. This is stronger than any weapon you bring, she said aloud. The mech paused. Then its sensor dimmed and it walked away. It didn't destroy anything. It didn't even speak. Jaren stared at her like she'd just wrestled a tornado. That was gutsy, he muttered. I thought we were gonna end up ash. Rayla looked down at the sprout and whispered, they are afraid of what they cannot control. This scares them more than fire. That day more neighbors came. They brought extra tools and jars of preserved food. Nobody asked about the alien girl anymore. They brought her seeds. Real ones, corn, beans, tomatoes. Ryla touched each one like it was treasure. She asked what each needed, and they told her. In the fields, Ryla worked without stopping. Her royal robe was gone. She wore a patched-up shirt and pants that Jaren had stitched from spare cloth. She had calluses now. Her hands looked like a farmer's hands. She smiled at the sun for the first time in her life. That night, as stars blinked in above them, she sat beside Jaren on the porch. If I take this knowledge home, she said, I can feed millions. But they won't believe it. They think only machines can make food. Jaren shrugged. Then show them the dirt. Make them touch it. A wind passed through the crops, shaking the leaves softly. Ryla tilted her head and listened. Your world speaks in a different voice, she said. It doesn't roar. It hums, Jaren nodded. Most folks forget to listen. You didn't. Suddenly, a loud pulse shook the ground. The porch rattled. Rayla stood up fast, grabbing a tool by instinct. In the distance, blue light erupted across the tree line. Another ship was coming down. But this one wasn't from her enemy's fleet. It was from her own empire. Jaren stepped beside her. More trouble? He asked. Rayla narrowed her eyes. If they've come to retrieve me, they'll find I'm no longer the same. She stepped off the porch and walked into the field, standing tall in front of the light. The ship landed in silence. It opened slowly. 3 armored figures stepped out. One of them held a banner of her house. The other 2 carried scanning gear and weapons, but they didn't aim them. They stared at her, stung by what they saw. Princess, the first one said. You are needed back home. The famine has worsened. The council grows restless. Rayla raised a handful of dirt and opened her palm. Then take this. It is all we lacked. And I know how to use it now. The soldiers looked at Rayla with disbelief. She was covered in dirt and sweat, her royal symbol gone from her clothing. Instead of standing in a palace, she stood barefoot on earth soil, holding a sprout in one hand and a garden hoe in the other. "You were sent on a diplomatic mission," the lead soldier said. "We expected you to return with a plan, not a pot of plants." Rayla walked past them and pointed to the crops behind her. "This is the plan, not machines, not programs. Just this." The second soldier scanned the field. "There are no defenses here. What if they attack again?" Rayla turned and held up her hand. "They already did. And this land survived. That is defense stronger than your armor." Jaren leaned on the porch post, listening. He didn't speak. He knew this was her moment. She had planted more than seeds here. She had grown a new part of herself, one that didn't need thrones to feel powerful. The soldiers followed Rayla as she moved through the rows. She explained each plant by name. She spoke of roots and moisture, sun and shade, like it was royal strategy. The soldiers took notes. They had never written about tomatoes before. When they tasted the vegetables, their expressions changed. One of them whispered, "This is alive. This is not factory paste." Rayla smiled. "It is life." "You've forgotten what that tastes like." Jaren walked over with a tray of tea and fresh bread. "Y'all should sit down. Learning hits harder when your stomach's empty." The soldiers sat without protest. Their weapons looked strange against the wood of the table. The younger soldier asked quietly, "How does a human know all this?" Rayla answered for him. "Because they never stopped listening to the ground. They knew dirt was not filth. It was home." That evening, the soldiers called their ship and reported everything. The transmission was full of terms never heard in their empire's language. Soil balance, crop rotation, earthworms. They spoke like students, not warriors. Far above them, the Empress herself watched the feed. Her golden eyes narrowed as she listened. Then, for the first time in decades, she spoke a single command to her court. "Summon the council. The farmer's method will be heard." Back on Earth, Rayla packed samples into special containers. "They'll need proof," she said. "Let them hold it. Let them see that something small can be powerful." Jaren handed her a pouch of seeds. "Take these too. They're stubborn like you." When the soldiers prepared to leave, Rayla turned to Jaren. Her eyes were bright but heavy. "I must go now, but this place is not behind me. It is inside me." Jaren nodded. "You're not leaving a farm. You're planting one somewhere else." As she stepped into the ship, something strange happened. The crops near the ramp shimmered. In the light, one of the plants bloomed early, as if sensing her departure. Jaren saw it and smiled without a word. The ship rose slowly. Wind rolled across the field. Rayla looked out the window, her hands pressed against the glass. Below her stood the man who taught her to change the world with nothing but dirt and patience. The journey back to her homeworld was short but silent. She watched the sprout grow inside the container. No machines fed it. No artificial light forced it to grow. It simply reached upward, believing in the sun. The capital of the Ilarian Empire was cold and metallic. Towers of steel blocked out the sky. Rayla stepped out of the ship with no crown, no guards, only a basket of seeds in her hand. The council chamber was silent as she entered. Every seat was filled. Eyes tracked her steps, some with confusion, some with curiosity, others with silent judgment. She stood in the center and placed a handful of soil on the floor. Then she set the sprouting plant beside it. "This is what will save us, not weapons, not power. Just life." One elder scoffed. "You expect us to trust earth dirt?" Rayla looked him straight in the eyes. "No, I expect you to learn, like I did. Like we all must now." The room fell into uneasy silence. Rayla stood at the center of the council floor, her hands dirty, her clothes plain. Around her, nobles in robes and soldiers in polished armor whispered behind stiff expressions. Never before had royalty returned with dirt under their nails, and Pride in soil instead of steel. One of the high ministers leaned forward. You speak of plants while cities starve. Where are your trade routes, your supply plans? Rayla stepped closer and pointed to the sprout. This does not need a trade route. It grows from the ground. And I now know how to make it grow. The Empress remained quiet, watching from her high seat. Her eyes were colder than stone, but she didn't stop the presentation. That alone gave Rayla strength. She knelt and gently opened the satchel of earth seeds. These are the future. They are slow, yes. But they don't run out. Another counselor stood and walked to her. He reached down and touched the soil. He rubbed it between his fingers. And frowned. This feels wrong. It's too basic, too wild. Rayla looked up at him. That's because it's alive. And we are not used to life anymore. Outside the palace, the streets were no better. Food lines stretched for blocks. Citizens traded anything for something edible. Artificial packs had run dry. Rations had failed. Machines meant to replicate nutrients had broken without maintenance. Starvation no longer targeted the poor. It was eating everyone. When word spread that the princess had returned with dirt, many mocked it. We need bread, not roots, one man shouted in the square. But then a child pointed to a sprout being placed in a small patch of ground near the temple. That wasn't there yesterday, she said. Day by day, Rayla moved through the city with her satchel and tools Jaren had gifted her. She found hidden corners between buildings, dry patches of land near broken fountains. She planted quietly. She didn't make speeches. She let the green do the talking. Children began to follow her. They asked questions like she once had. What does this one become? How deep do we bury it? Why does it sleep at night? She smiled at them and answered each question with patience. Because all life needs rest, she told them. One morning, a noblewoman approached her. My son is weak. He has not eaten in days. Can your dirt help? Rayla handed her a small pot with a single growing plant. It will take time. But yes, if you water it, it will answer. Behind closed doors, the council grew restless. Some called her actions foolish. Others called them rebellion. The Empress listened without a word. Then she called for her engineers. Build gardens. Real ones. From the ground up, she said. Use her knowledge. Make it happen. The first public farm was built in the old war factory. Metal floors were torn out. Light holes were cut into the ceiling. For the first time in decades, sunlight touched the center of the capital. People gathered, unsure. But when the first tomato turned red, they clapped like it was a miracle. Rayla stood beside the garden beds, teaching others how to tell when a plant was ready. You don't pull them early, she said. You wait until they fall into your hands. She smiled when she said it, remembering Jaren's voice saying those same words back on Earth. A message came to her one evening. A private letter sealed with Earth's diplomatic mark. She opened it carefully and found a small note inside. Harvest's good. The chickens miss you, Jay. Her fingers trembled, and for a moment, she just closed her eyes and breathed. The Empress finally called her to the throne room. Alone. No guards. No council, just them. Rayla entered and bowed low. The Empress looked older than she remembered. Not weaker, just tired. You did what no general could. You fed us, she said. I only learned, Rayla replied. From someone who never saw war but still knew how to win. The Empress stood and walked slowly toward the window. Will you continue this work? Rayla raised her chin. Until no one goes hungry. Anywhere. The Empress looked out over her city, where green had begun to creep over stone. Then you are no longer just a princess, she said. You are our seed bearer. And this empire will grow again. The title seed bearer spread faster than fire across the empire. Rayla never asked for it, but everywhere she went, people greeted her with that name. It was no longer spoken with sarcasm or disbelief. It carried weight. It carried hope. And she carried it with both hands. More planets sent desperate requests to the capital. Colonies built in stone and steel had no farming knowledge. Generations had relied only on food modules and synthetic packs. Now those systems were failing. And only Earth's simple dirt seemed to offer an answer. Ryla selected a small team of learners. Not generals, not scientists. Just ordinary citizens who had shown love for planting. She gave them seeds from Earth and tools shaped from old blueprints Jaren had drawn by hand. She called them the soil path. The soil path traveled to outer worlds, planting in barren outposts, teaching in broken cities, and building greenhouses from trash and scrap. Each success felt like another heartbeat in a body long thought dead. Each green sprout was a breath of life returned, not all supported her movement. Some still believed farming was beneath their empire. A powerful faction known as the Synth Authority began speaking out. "Why should we lower ourselves to dirt?" their leader said. "We are a species of stars, not soil." But people ignored their words when they saw what soil gave them. Fields began to grow on moons once covered in dust. Vegetables replaced synthetic paste in homes. Children learned to plant before they learned to count. The stars were still beautiful, but now the ground was sacred too. On one such moon, a drought hit unexpectedly. The machines brought to support the garden failed. The people panicked, but the soil path didn't leave. They stayed and dug wells by hand. Rayla arrived in secret and helped carry buckets. When water finally burst from the ground, the people wept and called her by a new name. They called her the Water Finder. She laughed at the name but accepted it. "I didn't find water," she told the crowd. "I found patience." That moment was carved into stone outside the garden gates for all who passed to remember. Jaren, back on Earth, received news of her titles through trade diplomats. He didn't speak of it often, but every morning he watered a row of plants she had once touched. Still teaching folks how to listen to dirt, he'd mutter to the sky. He had started writing a guidebook, not just on farming, but on trust, on humility, on what it meant to feed someone with your own hands. He didn't know if she'd ever read it, but he wrote it anyway, and he named it for Ryla. Meanwhile, the Empress declared a new festival. It was no longer a celebration of conquest. It was a festival of planting. Entire cities stopped work for a day and dug into the soil together. Elders planted beside youth. Soldiers planted beside bakers. Across the stars, the sound of shovels replaced the sound of drills. Rayla stood in the middle of one such city during the festival. As she handed a young boy a seed, he asked, "Will this grow into a tree?" She smiled. "Yes, if you treat it like a friend, not a tool." The boy nodded and held the seed like it was a promise. Later that evening, she stood alone in a small garden she had made beside the capital's old wall. She touched the leaves and whispered thanks. She had begun this journey with fear in her chest. Now her heart beat in rhythm with the roots beneath her feet. The Synth Authority grew more aggressive. They claimed the focus on farming weakened their grip over technology. "We were builders of machines, not farmers," they said. But their words held less power now. The people no longer feared hunger. And when fear fades, control breaks. Still, Rayla watched closely. She knew every garden would face storms. Not just weather, but politics. Resistance would come. Some seeds fail, some crops die. But if enough hands protect the soil, growth always returns. She met with the Empress one night under the stars. No guards, just two women in simple clothes, watching fireflies dance near the new riverbanks. "You've done what none could," the Empress said. "You've made the stars bloom again." Ryla looked up at the constellations. "Not just me. Earth showed me the way. A farmer gave me the map. And now I carry it for all of us." Asterisk whispers of revolution began in the far reaches of the empire. Not of weapons or power, but of soil and seeds. It was strange to the nobles who had always ruled with cold hands. But to the common people, the ground beneath their feet finally meant something again. The synth authority, losing influence day by day, held a secret meeting. Their leader, Vorn Decker, struck the table with a fist. The empire bows to a girl. With dirt under her nails, he growled. We must act before she roots herself deeper. They planned to sabotage the largest garden in the capital. It had become a symbol. A living monument of peace, growth, and Earth's influence. If it burned, the people might fear again. If it died, perhaps hope would wither with it. Ryla was warned 2 days before the planned attack. A boy from the soil path overheard the plan and ran for hours through narrow alleys to reach her. When he told her, out of breath and shaking, she did not panic. She simply looked out over the garden. Instead of guards, she called for workers, gardeners, teachers, children. She asked them all to gather and protect the crops not with weapons, but with presence. Let them see we are not afraid. Let them know the roots are deep. Hundreds showed up the next morning. They stood among the rows of green. They sang songs passed down from Earth and from their own worlds. They watered the plants with their bare hands and stood shoulder to shoulder as one. When the synth agents arrived under cover of night, they stopped at the edge of the field. What they saw wasn't a garden, it was a wall of people. No weapons, no machines, just unity. They turned and left without a word, their plan buried in silence. The next day, Rayla returned to the garden with a basket of fruits and vegetables. She handed them out herself. This is the power they fear, she said. Not the food, the care behind it, the love in it, the strength it gives. News of the failed attack reached the Empress by nightfall. She summoned her High Council and made a final decision. The synth authority is dissolved, she said. Their machines will serve the farms. Their silence will serve the soil. Across the empire, abandoned facilities were turned into training centers. Ryla led the design. She made sure every building had windows for sunlight and patches of real ground. Let every student feel the dirt, she instructed. That's where knowledge begins. Jaren finally received a visitor. A small transport landed on his old field, kicking up dry leaves and dust. Rayla stepped out, smiling wider than he remembered. She wore no crown. Just a simple woven tunic and boots stained with travel. He didn't speak right away. He just walked over and handed her a shovel. Still remember how to use one? He asked. Ryla laughed and took it. Only every day of my life. They worked together again in silence, planting rows side by side. The land hadn't changed much. But Jaren could feel something different in the air. It wasn't just her presence. It was purpose. It was legacy. At night, they sat on the porch with 2 mugs of tea. You saved a galaxy, Jaren said at last. Ryla shook her head. I didn't save it. I reminded it of what it forgot. Jaren reached into his bag and handed her a worn notebook. I wrote something for you. It's yours now. Call it Earth's parting gift. Rayla took it with care, opening to the first page. Inside were diagrams, notes, sketches, and thoughts from the man who taught her everything without asking for anything in return. She stood before leaving, holding the book close. I want you to visit. See what your seeds became. See how stars now bloom because of your soil. Jaren looked at his fields, then back at her. You've got your harvest. I've still got mine. But yeah, one day I'll come see what grew out there. Rayla returned to her empire with the notebook held tightly in her hands. It was more valuable than any royal scroll or data crystal. Inside were lessons not just about plants, but about kindness, humility, and patience. Jaren's words were now part of her soul. She called for a meeting of the soil path and placed the notebook on the table. This is now your guide, she said. We will teach not from memory, but from his hand. We will honor the roots that helped us grow. Copies of the notebook were made and translated into different languages. Every colony received one. It was called The Farmer's Way, and it became sacred text in places where people had once forgotten what it meant to care for the land. On a distant mining planet where no food had grown for decades, a boy planted his first seed by following the steps in the book. Weeks later, he watched a green sprout break through the black dust. He cried in silence and kissed the soil. The Empress declared the day of that sprout's bloom a new empire-wide holiday. It was named the Day of First Root. On this day, every person was required to plant at least one seed and touch the ground with their bare hands. Rila traveled to each world for the first celebration. On one icy moon, she planted herbs in heated beds. On a desert colony, she worked alongside children to dig holes near a water pipe. On a station in orbit, they grew sprouts under artificial sun, but with real soil from Earth. People began to share harvests between worlds, not for profit, not for politics, just as gifts. Ships once used for war now carried baskets of food between systems. Tomatoes from one moon were traded for peppers from another. For the first time, trade tasted like friendship. Rila stood in front of the largest spaceport and watched crates filled with vegetables and fruit being loaded. She remembered the hunger in her people's eyes when she first left. Now their eyes sparkled with health and light. Her journey had come full circle, but not all was peaceful. A hidden faction of the old synth authority had begun working underground. They believed the soil movement had made the empire weak. They whispered that machines should lead again. That dirt was for the poor. They started small, spreading lies, breaking irrigation systems, burning books. But the people remembered what hunger felt like, and they refused to go back. When one garden was attacked, 10 more rose around it. When a seed bank was destroyed, citizens offered double from their own storage. Rila addressed the empire from the garden throne, a new seat carved from wood and vines, not gold. You are the soil now, she said, and soil remembers. Soil protects. Soil grows stronger after storms. In response, millions gathered across the stars and planted in silence. They didn't shout. They didn't fight. They just worked the land. That quiet defiance was more powerful than any army. Rila sent a personal message to Earth, a recording of her standing in front of a field of alien vegetables. Your farmer changed a galaxy, she said. Tell him that when he's ready. There's a place for him here. Jaran received the message during a light rain. He stood under the porch roof, watching the clouds move. He smiled and nodded slowly, placing the recording device beside the shovel she once used. More soil path teams were trained, not just in planting, but in defending the gardens from future threats. They learned diplomacy. They studied weather. They built alliances across planets, not with weapons, but with watering cans and seeds. An entire planet once abandoned due to radiation was slowly being reclaimed. Soil was cleaned, crops tested, shelters built. People returned, following the guidance in the notebook. A ruined world was becoming a garden again. At night, Rila walked among her original garden in the capital. The same plants she had first brought from Earth still grew strong. She knelt and touched a sprout. You were the first, she whispered. And now look how far your roots have traveled. Asterisk. The sun rose over the capital gardens with golden light breaking across the leaves. Rila stood quietly on the eastern walkway, breathing in the soft scent of herbs and blossoms. Birds from different worlds chirped among the branches, each one adapting to the new life around them. Her fingers brushed the petals of a violet bloom brought from a world that once only knew ash. She smiled gently, remembering the first time she failed to keep a plant alive. That failure had led her to the man who changed everything. She turned her gaze to the sky as a small ship descended through the clouds. The landing was soft and slow. Dust rose gently around the craft as its door opened. A familiar figure stepped out, holding a worn backpack and squinting under the alien sun. Jaren had finally come. He didn't look different, but something in his eyes said he knew what this moment meant. Rayla walked up to him, her boots crunching over the path of gravel. "Took you long enough," she said with a teasing grin. Jaren shrugged. "Had to finish the harvest. Corn doesn't pick itself." They walked through the garden in silence at first. He touched the vines. He knelt and sniffed the soil. He spoke few words, but every motion showed pride. The earth farmer had returned not to judge, but to witness the legacy his hands began. Children followed them as they walked. One girl offered Jaren a ripe fruit. He took it and tasted it slowly. "Sweet," he said. "Sweeter than anything I ever grew." Rayla nodded. Because it was planted with stories and watered with faith, Jaren was invited to speak at the University of Soil Sciences. The hall was filled with scholars, diplomats, and leaders from dozens of worlds. He cleared his throat and looked down at the pages in his hand, then folded them and spoke from the heart. "I'm not a teacher," he said. "I'm a man with dirt on his hands and time on his side. What you've built here isn't just farming. It's trust. It's remembering where life starts. Don't forget it again." After the speech, he walked back to the garden alone. He found a quiet bench under a fruiting tree and sat down. Rayla joined him minutes later, holding 2 cups of tea. They sat in silence, watching a small boy teach his little sister how to press seeds into the soil. "You think this will last?" Jaren finally asked. Rayla didn't answer right away. She watched a breeze carry petals across the path before speaking. "It will if we keep reminding them why it matters. If we keep planting more than food. If we keep planting meaning." That evening, a starship passed low above the city, dropping crates of compost and seeds on remote areas where gardens had yet to grow. Rayla watched with her hands folded. "Even the stars are delivering life now," she whispered. "It's no longer war they bring." The Empress passed the crown to her successor weeks later. She stepped down not in shame or sickness, but in satisfaction. Her final decree was simple. Let all thrones be built in gardens. Let all rulers kneel to the soil once each year. Jaren spent the next few weeks visiting planets touched by the soil path. He traveled in silence, sometimes planting beside strangers, sometimes only watching. On each world, they knew who he was without needing to ask. His legend was whispered like a bedtime story. On the last night of his visit, he stood under an alien tree that glowed softly in the dark. The air was warm. Rayla joined him with a small package. "For you," she sighed. Inside was a jar of preserved seeds and a handwritten copy of The Farmer's Way in 20 languages. He held the jar up to the moonlight. "These go back to Earth," he said. "So your story lives there too," Rayla nodded. "And when someone finds them, they'll know peace once grew from one man's hands." Together they looked up at the sky where once warships had crossed, and now only trading vessels moved. Worlds that had once burned now glowed green from orbit. Hunger had not ended, but it had been answered, not by force, but by farmers,